We are back, and we are joined right now by Teresa Romero, president of the United Farm Workers. Thanks so much for coming on the show today, Teresa.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, and by the way, congrats on the congressional medal, right? I mean, I saw that earlier when I was doing some research, so that's a high honor.
It definitely was. It definitely has. And you know what? To me, it was proof that President Biden saw farm workers, their struggles and their contributions.
Well, that's good to hear. We are in a very difficult time right now for farm workers in this country. Matt, I sent you that tweet from last week. United Farm Workers put out this image here. Basically, it seems like this threatening message was sent to multiple different locations. We're pulling this up here. Yeah. Multiple UFW union offices received this in the mail this week, and it says report illegal aliens at schools, at work, at church, at restaurants, in your neighborhood. There is nowhere to hide. This was sent again to multiple locations. Trump's coming is what it says there. So I guess, Teresa, if you could just react to those threats, and we can take it from there.
It is inhumane. We are a country of immigrants. We're a country, all of us came from somewhere else. And the fact that we are terrorizing immigrants, but mostly immigrants of color, who contribute to our economy, who contribute to their communities, who have bought homes, who pay taxes, and are threatened like this, it should be illegal, but for sure it's inhumane.
And what has the environment been like for farm workers since Trump took office earlier last week?
It is, like I said, they're being terrorized. They are afraid to even go to church, to go to the market, to buy food for their family. Children are afraid to go to school because they don't know if their mom and dad are going to be home when they get back. It has, two of our members were stopped. They were just driving home from work, and they were stopped by immigration. And two of them were detained, and within 24 hours, they were already in Mexico.
And can you speak about the United Farm Workers and how your union includes folks who are undocumented, right? And just some of the folks that are a part of your union, and how everybody is standing really in solidarity, but also in fear of this crackdown.
Absolutely. We all know that the only way that our workforce can be protected is having a union contract, because they're undocumented, they are abused to no end. They're threatened. There've been cases where they're sexually abused. And what we're trying to do and make sure that we protect them. And the best way to do it is with a union contract. But also we are doing sessions to inform not only farm workers, but our immigrant community of what their rights are. And they need to understand that, like anybody else, they have the right to an attorney. They have the right to not sign anything, not to say anything. Unfortunately, from what we have heard from workers who have been detained, they're intimidated. They're yelled at, they're threatened, to where they are forced to sign whatever they put in front of them. And this is not our legal system. And farm workers are being, not only farm workers, but immigrants of color are being targeted and intimidated.
Can you speak a bit about how the threat of deportation is used against farm workers, perhaps if they have complaints about their work environment or unsafe conditions or abuse? what are some of the stories you'd like our audience to know about how that is deployed?
We have had cases where workers, not under contract, but were brave enough to file a complaint. And one of the things that has happened in the past is that the attorneys for growers have called immigration. So before they enter the place we're going to testify, they're detained and they're deported. Farm workers who say, you have not paid me, I worked these many hours and you didn't pay me, they are fired. So this is they're not asking for more than the rights. Look, farm workers work under very difficult conditions. Here in California, we're having fires, and we're talking about it because it is in an area where it is heavily populated. But farm workers go through this every year. They work under dangerous conditions because the air quality is dangerous. It's horrible. They work under temperatures in California. The temperatures the last couple of years have gone to 120 degrees. There are states in our country that in the winter, it's very cold, and they continue to work, to put food on our tables.
And for children too, do you hear stories often of the abuse of child labor as well by maybe some of the employers that you're familiar with, that some of your members have had horrible experiences with?
Absolutely. We have even reached out to media to make sure that they really talk about these issues. There are different states. We need to remember that farm workers were excluded from the NLRB in the 1930s. So they do not have a right to organize and get a contract. I mean, they can organize, but the employers cannot give them, a contract that they deserve. There's only 2 states where farm workers have these rights: California and New York. So whatever happens in other states, the abuses that happens in other states, we report them. We call legislators on those states to make sure that if they have children. However, we also need to remember there's some states that allow children to work starting at the age of 12. So they're not necessarily breaking the law, but we need to change those laws. We need to make sure that farm workers, their children, their families are protected. We have in California heat illness protections that growers are not enforcing, and farm workers die because of the high temperatures. And all we're asking for is access to water. We're asking for a 10-minute break every 2 hours if the temperatures are 95, in a shaded area for them to be able to rest. That's all we are asking for. That's what the regulations say here in California, and they're not implementing them.
And with this threat of deportation, this just emboldens these folks to essentially say, screw off. You want basic safety? We don't care, because we can just call ICE.
Exactly. And the hypocrisy of the growers, they know that they need this workforce. These workforce, farm workers, these men and women have been working in agriculture for 20, 30, 40 years. They're professionals, they're experienced, they depend on them. But although they know that they need this workforce, they're opposed a path to citizenship for farm workers. And during the previous Trump administration, we passed through Congress the Farm Workforce Modernization Act with Republican support. And we're going to introduce it again because these workforce, they are essential workers. They feed us every day. They're the backbone of agriculture, and they deserve to be treated with dignity and respect.
How do you think that we got to this point in America where, frankly, the immigration conversation has moved so far to the right? I mean, I feel that the Democrats have not done enough, frankly, to combat some of the real just like racism and horrific brutality that we're seeing from the Republicans, and now they're taking advantage of it.
Absolutely. And it is getting worse under this administration. I think Democrats can do more, and we're working with them to make sure that we get this bill introduced. It is the recognition of this workforce needs to be appreciated by everybody in this country, legislators, consumers, Republicans, Democrats, independents. We all need to understand that we are all immigrants. You and I or our ancestors came from somewhere else. So let's come together and do something for this workforce. Let's come together and do something for immigrants in general, who are, like I said earlier, contributing to this economy in the billions of dollars that they pay in taxes. So yes, I agree with you. A lot more needs to be done, and it has to come from both parties.
And you mentioned the consumer side of things. Can you speak a little bit about how in this election grocery prices were a big part of the concerns of the voters, and Trump has tried to capitalize on that, and what this does for grocery prices because of how much our economy relies on these farm workers?
He absolutely capitalized on that. I agree with you 100%. The price of the products are not set by the workers. They're set by the big corporations and the big companies, and they're the ones that set the price higher, do not pay more to their employees, and their profits are higher. But I don't want to make this issue about the price of food. I really want to make this issue about the human pain, the human toil on immigrants, on their families. When I listen to a child, a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old, that tells me they don't want to go to school because they're afraid mom and dad are not going to be home when they get back, this is what happened. These children are U.S. citizens. So it is, for the consumers, I know it is about the price of food. Farm workers have no saying on that. So let's look at them as human beings.
Absolutely. And you mentioned some of those stories. What do you anticipate going forward? I know that's hard to even predict, but it just in terms of you're already seeing the pain that you describe, and it's been less than 2 weeks. So how bad can this get? And how bad is it right now?
It is bad, and it is going to get bad. Even if the deportations are slowed down, the fear and the threat of those deportations is going to be in the minds of immigrants, of children, of adults, and it's that is not going to change. Everything that they do, everything that they accept from employers is going to be based on that fear. So the abuses are going to be greater. Their challenges are going to be greater. The fear that the children are growing under is going to be devastating. So even if the deportations slow down, the consequences are going to be greater.
And can you speak about the Trump administration's effort to categorize immigrants as criminals, both by just kind of saying it, even though they may be here under temporary protected status, or they may just be undocumented, but he's trying to blur the line just by having basically a civil violation of basically maybe not having your documentation into a level of criminality where he wants the photo op of them in cuffs off military planes or at Guantanamo Bay. I mean, that level of dehumanization is so deliberate. Yes. What's your reaction?
He has used that to demonize immigrants of color because he is not going into white neighborhoods where I can guarantee you that there is going to be also immigrants, that they deserve also to be here. They deserve the right to be here. But he is demonizing immigrants of color. The majority of the crimes in this country are not committed by immigrants. The majority of the most difficult work in this country is done by immigrants. The majority of workers who suffer abuse by employers are immigrants. So the fact that he's demonizing, and pains me and it angers me that many people are buying his lies. I'm an immigrant. I'm a U.S. citizen. And now I have to carry with me proof that I'm a U.S. citizen. Why? Because I'm brown. And I can be stopped at any time for whatever reason and detained if I cannot prove that I'm a U.S. citizen.
Lastly, Teresa, what would be your advice? Because I'm concerned about my neighbors here in New York City. Eric Adams is now basically openly begging for Donald Trump's pardon. So my assessment is that he's going to let him do raids in the city if he wants to. For folks that may not be in a state with a Democratic governor or in an area where they feel like they can be safe, and who knows what's safe at this point, it's the federal government. But what would be your advice to anybody listening to this who to save themselves if they can, or try to, yeah.
I want to make sure that people understand what their rights are. I want them to understand that, and I know it's difficult because fear controls what we do in many cases, but I want them to have and reach out to an attorney and have the name of that attorney with them. And if they're detained, that all they do is, this is my attorney, contact my attorney. I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going to sign anything. Once they see a name of an attorney, I think their actions are, or I'm hoping that their actions are going to be different. But I want people to remember that they have rights, even if they're undocumented. And they need to enforce those rights to protect themselves and their families.
Well, really appreciate your time today, Teresa. If you can support the United Farm Workers, please do. And if you're listening to this and think you may be subject to some of these deportation policies, please take Teresa's advice. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Emma, for having me. Really appreciate it.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.